Konnichiwa, bonjour, aloha guys. Today we got an interesting topic. Complex just released their list of the 50 best Atlanta rappers of all time, and we got some problems here, alright? This list is not good, and it's not even that Complex forgot a bunch of rappers. The problem is that there's several rappers who don't belong here. There's rappers that are way too low on this list, and with a city that has bred some of the most innovative hip-hop acts of all time, the recency bias and some of the placements on this list just seem like an absolute joke. So in this video, we're gonna go through the entire list, see what Complex got wrong, what they got right, and most importantly, we're going to take a step back and appreciate the amazing game-changing rappers that have come out of Atlanta.
There's a lot of little nuggets in both of their disses that if it wasn't for these breakdowns, and salute to, guys like this, Rapaholics, because I think they directly get it.
So before we dive into it, we have to understand how Complex decided which artist deserves what position on this list. They claim to have used 3 different determining factors. Number 1 is skill as a hip-hop artist, and judging by the placements on this list, I definitely don't think they're prioritizing lyricism. When they say hip-hop artist, they probably just mean overall, like how catchy are your flows, how unique is your style and delivery, and what stands out about your bars and your voice, etc. Because yeah, it doesn't seem like they're prioritizing lyricism on this list, so when they say skill as a hip-hop artist, that's what I think they mean. And the second determining factor that they used to create this list is strength of the artist's catalog, meaning how memorable, impactful, enjoyable, and classic are their albums and hits. And the third deciding factor is the lasting influence and commercial impact of that artist's music. They're also not limiting this list to artists who are strictly born in Atlanta, but instead they're taking the Tupac approach. Because if you guys didn't know, Tupac was actually born in New York, but obviously represents California. And that's how they're making this list here. They say an Atlanta rapper by our definition is someone who came to creative life in the city and actively represented the ethos of the A in their music. So alright, with all these factors and what we're talking about here, there should be some amazing names on this list. Right? Well, there are, but the list already gets off to a horrible start. At number 50, we have Lil Nas X. And if this list is about artists who actively represent the ethos of the A in their music, then in my opinion, Lil Nas X deserves no placement on this list. He came up combining trap and country music, but very shortly after ditched that sound to take his music in a more mainstream pop direction. His biggest hits like That's What I Want and Montero do nothing to encapsulate the Atlanta sound or push Atlanta hip-hop forward. His only real quote-unquote hip-hop hit is Industry Baby with Jack Harlow, and on that song he's doing his best Travis Scott impression. And Travis Scott is a Houston artist, which is very far from Atlanta, even though I would argue that Travis does take inspiration from Atlanta artists like Young Thug and the Migos. But regardless, if the determining factors that Complex is using here to judge which artists deserve to be on this list are skills as a hip-hop artist and strength of their catalog, then I definitely don't think Lil Nas X deserves to be on this list. As a hip-hop artist, he does very little to push the genre forward or combine elements of Atlanta hip-hop to introduce a new sound to the culture. And if you're talking catalog, then what are we doing here? He has 1 EP and 1 album. His projects and hits sound as much like country or rock music as they do hip-hop, and that's all they really are, is just hits. Complex in this entire article just spend the time talking about his hits, but there's no real influence that Lil Nas X has left on Atlanta hip-hop at all. Not even close to anything any of the other artists on this list have brought to the culture. So given Complex's criteria for this list, given Lil Nas X's catalog, I don't think he deserves any sort of placement on this list. The most he's done is open the doors for hip-hop artists to collaborate with country artists, but have we seen any other Atlanta artists do this after Old Town Road? I don't think so, and I don't think he deserves this placement on this list more than someone like Timo or Cujo from Goody Mob do. But let's keep going with the first horrible placement on this list, which is going to be at number 48 with Sci-Hi the Prince. Sci-Hi deserves to be way higher up on this list. To put it into perspective, right after him at number 46 and 47 are Rich the Kid and Trouble. R.I.P. to Trouble, but I don't think he has any business being higher than Sci-Hi the Prince on this list. If you want to talk solo catalog, Trouble or Rich the Kid or a lot of the artists on this list don't have an album better than Sci-Hi's No Dope on Sundays. And beyond just that, Sci-Hi has one of the most legendary pens in all of hip-hop. If you guys didn't know, this is Kanye West's best ghostwriter. Just to give you a little bit of an idea of the songs that Sci-Hi was involved in, he wrote on Father Stretch My Hands by Kanye, Ghost Town, FML, New Slaves, Off the Grid, All Day, Waves, Wolves, Real Friends, or Ultralight Beam. He wrote Sicko Mode by Travis Scott, Stargazing by Travis Scott, Coffee Bean. All the best songs on Astroworld and The Life of Pablo were written by Sci-Hi the Prince. So if you want to talk catalog, yeah, he hasn't put out a lot of his own music, but if we're talking skill as a hip-hop artist, if we're talking the influence and commercial impact of their music or the music that they penned, then Sci-Hi should easily be top 30 on this list. He's written on some of the best albums of the 2010s and is responsible for some of Kanye and Travis Scott's best songs. The rest of the top 40, as I mentioned before, includes artists like Trouble, Rich the Kid, K-Camp. He described K-Camp as a silent assassin, and I kind of agree. He had a lot of trap hits in the early 2010s before trap became the dominant mainstream subgenre of hip-hop. hip-hop. Songs like Cut Her Off and Renegade are sleeper hits. But if you're gonna include a guy like K-Camp on this list, then we can't forget about OG Mako, who's missing off this list and definitely deserves the placement before a guy like Lil Nas X, just for the strength of his hit, you guessed it. He was one of the first artists signed to QC along with the Migos before they became the massive label that they are today. And yeah, he might be a one-hit wonder, but that one hit was way ahead of its time, and did a lot more to influence the current state of Atlanta trap music than a guy like Lil Nas X music did. Matter of fact, if we're talking about one-hit wonders, where's Trinidad James on this list? I'm kinda trolling, but if their criteria is influence and impact of their music, then there's no denying that Pop the Molly I'm Sweating still lives on as one of the greatest one-liners in all of Atlanta trap music. At number 43, we got B.O.B. And man, I forgot how much of a hitmaker B.O.B. was in the early 2010s. Not to focus too much on Lil Nas X, but like, B.O.B. was Lil Nas X before Lil Nas X. He gave Bruno Mars his first #1 hit with Nothing on You. He embodied that Atlanta sound. Like, he was like a pop crossover hybrid of CeeLo Green and Andre 3000. And if you weren't in elementary school singing I Could Really Use a Wish Right Now, Wish Right Now, then I mean, I don't know what you were doing. Certified hitmaker, he definitely deserves that number 43 placement on this list. I would even give him number 42 because at 42 they put OJ the Juice Man. And besides his song Make the Trap Say A and his legendary XXL freshman freestyle, I can't really remember much about this guy's career. But let's give him credit where credit is due. That XXL freshman freestyle that he had, I mean, that could be the top 5 freshman freestyles of all time.
See it rings on like a basketball player. Freshman of the year like a basketball player. What it do, good man, I'm here to stay. Aw man, cool man, we in your fade. Hey.
At number 41, we have Roscoe Dash. Roscoe Dash is so underrated in my opinion. Just for his hook on No Hands alone, he deserves a spot in like the top mid 30s to 40s. He was like Future before Future. Like, he was slaughtering hooks. He was a natural hit maker. He meshed his vocal deliveries with autotune so well. And if he was more consistent, then he would be much higher on this list, especially because he was one of the early pioneers of that melodic trap sound. He was Future before Future. He was Fetty Wap before Fetty Wap, and he would have fit in perfectly with this newer generation of rappers. The next placement I have a problem with is Rich Homie Quan at number 37. I mean, come on, what are we doing here? The guy right above him at 36 is Fabo, who's known for his hit Laffy Taffy. And it's like, are we really gonna discredit Rich Homie Quan's hit-making capabilities by saying that Fabo had more legendary hits than him? Maybe it's just nostalgia talking, because I was around 16 years old during Rich Homie Quan's meteoric rise. And similarly to Roscoe Dash, this guy was very much ahead of his time. I mean, forget the legendary run that he had with Young Thug and Rich Gang. Rich Homie Quan was dropping incredible hits all on his own. Songs like Type of Way, My Hitta, Flex. If you were around in the early to mid 2010s, you know how dominant Rich Homie Quan was around this time. And he kind of brought that mumbly, slurred out, alien-like vocal delivery to the mainstream before Young Thug did. I mean, sure, his career wasn't long, he wasn't very consistent, especially given the fact that right when he stopped making hits consistently is when trap music blew up on a level we hadn't seen before. Like, Rich Homie Quan would fit in perfectly with the Migos, Lil Baby, Gunna. If he stayed consistent, he'd be way, way higher on this list. But again, if the deciding factors are how much influence your music has on the game, then Rich Homie Quan deserves a higher placement because he was killing hooks, he was making massive trap bangers way before trap was accepted by mainstream hip-hop as much as it is today. My next problem is going to be with JID at number 27, and it's like, again, we gotta go back to their criteria. Complex is putting this list together based on skills as a hip-hop artist, strength of the artist's catalog, and the lasting influence that their impact has had on music. JID embodies all of these 3 criteria perfectly. He's an amazing MC, he came out the gate in around 2015, and he wraps circles around all of his peers that came up around the same time as him, especially the ones in Atlanta. I mean, Complex says it themselves. They say JID is often been compared to Kendrick Lamar for the complex, dizzying way he approaches tracks. He's a true rapper's rapper, but he's also had chart success. He's gone toe-to-toe with rap titans like J. Cole and Lil Wayne on different records. And his style is not conventional. He's not just like a good technical MC. He sounds like a Martian. He sounds like if you put Andre 3000, Lil Wayne, and J. Cole in a blender. Like, that's what JID is. If you're talking lasting influence on music, I mean, I think JID is the sole reason why J. Cole's Dreamville record label is regarded as one of the best hip-hop labels of the last 10 years. He's only improved as the years go by, and if you want to talk strength of his catalog, then look no further than his albums like DiCaprio Tour, The Forever Story. Easily some of the best hip-hop projects of the last 5 to 10 years. So to put him at number 27 is just straight disrespectful. Not to spoil the rest of this list too much, but to put into perspective, JID is behind Lotto, he's behind Lil Yachty, Gunna, and many more. He should easily be top 20, at the very least. But speaking of that, let's move on to the top 20, because this is where the real problems emerge. Again, like I mentioned, Gunna is in the top 20 at the 20th position of this list, as the 20th best rapper from Atlanta of all time. And as Kanye would say, I like some of the Gunna songs, but what the hell does he know about being one of the top 20 Atlanta rappers of all time?
I like some of the Gaga songs. What the f?
does she know about cameras?
Like, they have him over Waka Flocka Flame. Half of the newer age artists on this list wouldn't exist if Waka Flocka Flame didn't pave the way for them initially. If you guys need a little history lesson on Waka Flocka Flame, he was Gucci Mane's protege, the first massive Atlanta trap artist that Gucci took under his wing way before Young Thug or Migos. And speaking of Migos, their ad-libs wouldn't exist without Waka Flocka Flame. He was the first one to come in with these energetic, menacing, raw, dark, out-of-this-world ad-libs. Like, just look up Waka Flocka Flame recording his ad-libs on YouTube and you'll see what I'm talking about. And Waka ushered in that Lex Luger hard-hitting trap production that was so dominant in the early 2010s. They're very different sounds, but I don't think you'd have that like rage video game type music and production without Lex Luger and Waka Flocka Flame. His first album, Flockavelli, is one of the best trap projects of all time, and I do have to emphasize with guys like Waka Flocka Flame and again Roscoe Dash and Rich Homie Quan and Future as well, they deserve more credit for being as big as they were given the dynamics of where hip-hop was at the time that they were coming up. This was before the streaming era. This was before people were just listening to music on their iPhones unless you were on like DatPiff or My Mixtapes, and labels were pushing more lyrical artists. Like now some of the biggest artists in the game are Playboi Carti, Travis Scott, and 21 Savage, but back then it was like Lil Wayne, Kanye West, and Eminem. And guys like Waka Flocka Flame or Future weren't necessarily known for their cohesive, conscious projects. They were known for hard-hitting trap bangers and fire mixtapes. So for them to push the boundaries that they did, commercially and just their influence in the culture, given the limitations that they had by the music industry at the time, it's much more impressive that they accomplished what they accomplished way back in the early 2010s versus if they were popping right now, as much as they were back then, they would have a much bigger push and resultingly they'd be able to do much bigger things on a commercial level. And I think that's my biggest problem with this list is there's a lot of recency bias. What I mean by that is it seems like Complex is forgetting history. They're rewarding artists and putting them at the top of this list based off of what they've done recently. They're forgetting that Waka Flocka Flame had some of the most influential trap bangers of all time, and instead they're rewarding Gunna and putting him higher on the list just because he's had a couple hits more recently. His influence doesn't hold a candle to Waka Flocka Flame's influence. Speaking of influence, then you got guys like Lil Jon and CeeLo Green who are lower on this list than Quavo, Playboi Carti, and Lil Baby. Like, I don't mean to sound like an old head, and especially because I'm really not one. I'm not even 30 years old, but like, go listen to a Goody Mob album, and then tell me that CeeLo Green deserves to be lower on this list than Lil Baby. You want to know where 5% Tint by Travis Scott came from? Go listen to Cell Therapy by Goody Mob. You want to know why CeeLo Green should be at least top 10 on this list? Go listen to his verse on Guess Who by Goody Mob. I mean, you want to talk influence, there's a reason why Lil Wayne, one of the most influential figures in all of hip-hop, cites Goody Mob as one of his favorite rap collectives of all time. And again, it's recency bias. I'm not taking away from what Lil Baby or Playboi Carti have done recently, but their influence, their catalog, and their skills as a hip-hop artist do not exceed guys like CeeLo Green or even Lil Jon. They also did a horrible ranking, in my opinion, of the Migos. They had Takeoff at 19, Quavo at 15, and then Offset at 13. I think if we're talking skill set as an artist, you gotta put Takeoff at number 1. Then if we're talking influence, you gotta put Quavo at number 1, because no one incorporated melodies the way he did. Like, he was the feature king in the late 2010s. And I don't think it's fair to judge them all by their solo work. Like, if we're talking solo work, I guess you could say Offset has the best catalog, but it's not by a wide stretch. None of them really produced the best solo albums, but as a collective, Takeoff was definitely the guy for the bars, Quavo was the guy for the melodies, and aside from maybe Culture One and their three-way EP, I don't think Offset was ever the standout on any of the Migos projects. Don't forget, he was locked up for a good amount of time during their monumental mixtape run in the late 2010s, which is personally my favorite era of the Migos, but beyond that, to give Offset some credit, I do think he had some of the best performances on their biggest album, Culture One. Like, his verses on T-Shirt and What's the Price, or his performance on Paper Bag were some of the standouts on their best album. So if he really was the best performer on their best album, then I guess you could kind of make the case for him being the best Migos. But I think if you look at their entire catalog, Quavo has always come with better melodies and hooks, and Takeoff has always come with better rapping performances. So again, I do think they got the order a little mixed up, but I also think it's an absolute disgrace that they have all the Migos below 21 Savage, Lil Baby, and Playboi Carti on this list. I mean, again, maybe I'm an old head, but I don't think Playboi Carti has an album as influential as Culture One. You have to remember that Migos kicked off the trap sound being the most dominant subgenre in all of hip-hop and really pushing it to the mainstream. Their number one hit, Bad and Bougie, was the first hip-hop Billboard number one hit aside from Black Beatles that we had seen in ages. And it marked a big turning point within hip-hop as a whole. We were now living in the streaming era and music was consumed differently, it sounded different, hits were constructed differently, and Bad and Bougie was definitely a way more unconventional rap hit than its predecessors. They paved the way for guys like Lil Baby, 21 Savage, and Gunna to have the massive mainstream careers that they had. So for that reason alone, I don't think they deserve to be lower on this list than guys like that. And again, if you want to talk about their talents as a hip-hop artist or their catalog alone, it's way stronger than 21 Savage's or Lil Baby's or Playboi Carti's. Takeoff could wrap circles around them. Quavo has dropped way better hits than any of these guys, and as a collective, they've dropped way better projects than any of them. And even the ordering of how they put Lil Baby, 21 Savage, and Playboi Carti, I think, is wrong. I mean, they have Playboi Carti last place, then they have 21, then they have Lil Baby. I think Lil Baby should definitely be last here. Like, yeah, he had a monster run from his album My Turn all the way up to his song The Bigger Picture, but he also had a massive fall off that needs to be studied. Like, 21 Savage has dropped at least 3 very strong projects, Playboi Carti as well. Lil Baby only has, I would say, like maybe 1.5. So to put him in the top 10 of the best Atlanta rappers of all time, I mean, it's just disgraceful, honestly. I might get some hate for this, but I would even put Gunna higher than Lil Baby. And I definitely wouldn't put either of them higher than CeeLo Green. I mean, I can't get over that. How disgraceful is it that they put a legend like CeeLo Green below Lil Baby? It's wild, but overall, I'm not too upset at the rest of the top 10. I mean, again, aside from CeeLo Green, I'd put him probably in the top 10. But otherwise, you have 2 Chainz at number 9, Big Boy at number 8, then Ludacris at number 7. You have Young Thug above both of them, which, look, again, I was talking about recency bias before. I think this is definitely a case of recency bias. You could argue that the odds were definitely stacked against Young Thug when he first came in the game, and he defied them all and has resultingly had massive influence on the current generation of hip-hop. But you want to go catalog for catalog, does he really have something as good as Aquemini or any of the Outkast albums? I get it, like, we want to give Andre 3000 all the praise, but Big Boy is an incredible artist, and he had an incredible solo career as well. You can make the case for him being top 3 on this list, just off his influence alone, let alone his catalog of albums and hits with Outkast. And then the top 5 is Jeezy, Gucci Mane, T.I., Future at number 2, and then Andre 3000. A little bit of recency bias with Future, but I guess you can't really argue his consistency. Honestly, he came in the game around 2010, and he's dropped nothing but hits the entire time he's been in the game. His influence is damn near unmatched. His style never goes stale, even though he's pushing 40 and rapping about things that 20-year-olds rap about. He has a couple diamond records. He got, I believe, his first solo number 1 this year, or I guess it wasn't necessarily a solo number 1 since Kendrick Lamar was featured on the record, but Future was the lead on this record. His other number 1 is Wait For You with Tems and Drake, and I don't think he's the reason why that song is number 1, whereas I think with Like That, he plays more of a role as to why that song is a hit. And it's pretty incredible that 14 years into the game, and he's dropping his best-selling albums this year. You can make a very strong case as to why Future should be top 5 of this list. Does he deserve the spot over T.I., Jeezy, Gucci Mane, or Big Boy? I mean, I don't really know. It's kind of subjective, but if we are going off of catalog, consistency, influence, like, there's no denying that Future has all of those. And there's no signs of him slowing down. While a lot of the artists behind him on this list are well into the final stage of their career, Future shows no signs of slowing down. He dropped 2 number 1 albums this year. He might drop another one. He's on his biggest headlining tour currently than he's ever done before. A feature from Future today is as potent as it was 10 years ago. And yeah, I mean, that sums it up. He's a consistent hitmaker, nothing less. At number 1 is Andre 3000. I mean, this is self-explanatory. I don't need to say why he's number 1. And overall, I'm not too mad at the top 10 here. I mean, I would do my placements a little differently. I'd probably go for me, Andre 3000, then T.I., then Jeezy, Future, Big Boy, Gucci Mane, Young Thug, Ludacris, CeeLo Green, then 2 Chainz. Maybe swap Ludacris and CeeLo Green, but Ludacris as well is super underrated. Consistent hitmaker within the 2000s that gets overlooked because he kind of made that pivot into acting. But don't underestimate his catalog. Like, he has hits, he has great albums, definitely deserves the spot in the top 10. And yeah, my Mount Rushmore of Atlanta rap would probably be Andre 3000, then T.I., Jeezy, and either Future or Big Boy. Or even Gucci Mane. I mean, I'd kind of rotate between all 3 of them for that 4th place, depending on how I'm feeling that day. And again, my problem with this list is not necessarily in the top 10, but more what comes after that. And if we're counting Migos as one artist, then I'd probably put them in that top 10, in the bottom of that top 10, definitely above 2 Chainz if they were one artist, but 2 Chainz has a stronger solo catalog than any of the individual Migos do. Yeah, my problem with this list is after the top 10. I mean, that's where I think they got it all wrong. Putting guys like Lil Baby in the top 10, putting Playboi Carti and 21 Savage above CeeLo Green, above all the Migos, above Killer Mike, even above Lil Jon. Like, the Migos wouldn't exist without Lil Jon. Jermaine Dupri as well. The order of some of these artists is kind of crazy. crazy. And I think it's more to do with recency bias and the fact that, you know, Complex wants you talking about this stuff. Like, they want you to be shocked that Lotto is above JID because it gets them engagement, right? Prime example, I'm making a video about this list. Would I be making a video or would I have anything to discuss if I thought they got it perfect? It's hard to say, but in the comments, let me know, what's your top 5 best Atlanta rappers of all time? It's a hard list to make. Props for Complex for even thinking of doing it, because I like this type of discussion. I think Atlanta is currently one of the most influential and dominant cities within all of hip hop. So it's cool to kind of take a step back and discuss who is responsible for making the city what it is today within hip hop. So again, let me know where I got it wrong. Let me know where Complex got it wrong. Let me know your Mount Rushmore of Atlanta rappers in the comments, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.